Hey guys, here we are, one more RWI touchdown initiative. Um, Today, me and TB here, TB came hot as usual, even if he's still basically in his bed. He's going to do the coffee still, and he shared that he received a visit this week in the Sensóricas lab in Little Portugal in Montreal. And we were talking about that. And I said, hey, TB, this is something that is good to, it will be very interesting for us to register this, right? To record it and register this. And so here we are. So that's it. Be very welcome, Tim. Tim is still connecting his audio. So I pass to you, TB, to contextualize what was this person that came to the Sensorica lab and the types of conversations that you guys had. So go on.
Yeah, it's Tim around. Tim, are you around?
Tim is connecting audio still.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he's still connecting audio.
Yeah, so back to the, so we're talking about this visit of Arthur Brook at the Sensorica Lab. That we were, yeah, we started this conversation before I started to record. And
yeah, who is Arthur Brook? Because people at large though maybe never heard about Arthur Brook. Who is Arthur Brook and what he is related to?
Yeah, so he's one of the co-founders of Holochain. Also, he works on a MetaCurrency project, which is like a sort of an old project of his, thinking about wealth, currency. So yeah, actually, the MetaCurrency project has been very influential for us for the development of Sensorica. That's where he speaks about currencies as see the currents, okay, instead of just monetary currency, which is a generalization, right, of currencies. So yeah, so he has been very influential for me personally. I think is one of the top influencers on my thinking and development of Sensorica. So I was pretty happy. He woke me up in the morning with a call and said, "Hey, I'm in town. I want to come and see you and come with a friend, present you, this guy." So I jumped out of bed and I said, "Okay, let's do it." I was very happy. But yeah, so Vinny and I, before starting to record, we were talking about Holochain and its properties, and how it can be used to build like infrastructure for organizations like Sensorica for material peer production. So essentially, we focused on that. His friend, he's one of these guys involved with impact finance in Montreal, and so he wanted to see what we're up to, what we're doing, if we can collaborate. So we spoke about Sensorica. We spoke about breeding games that I thought is a very interesting project. It's like the hottest thing in terms of development, not just technology, but of peer production itself. It's kind of opening a crack in the system in terms of acceptability of open source do-it-yourself hardware. We want to pass it through the regulatory system to have it approved as a therapeutic device in the medical field. So it's kind of a very, very interesting thing. Because if these regulatory bodies accept open source do-it-yourself artifacts, products, then it's open season for material peer production. Okay, it means that we have rebuilt trust in this new production mechanism for quality and safety. So yeah. So I spoke about this project and how peer-to-peer technologies is key, right? And I gave some examples of NFT, like blockchain stuff, and and so it was interesting because then Arthur told me how this could be done with Holochain, which is much easier because essentially anything is an NFT natively within Holochain. You don't have to create NFTs. Any file is linked to other files through hash, like through this cryptographic, signatures. So it's native, it's fundamental, it's low level. Everything is an NFT within Holochain. So it says any file that you use and pass it around and link to other file, they are cryptographically chained. So you don't have to do anything. It's just if you have a design of an open source hardware and store it on Holo, for example, it's an NFT. What I didn't understand is the actually the smart contract part of it, and I still don't understand how Holochain deals with smart contracts, because the scheme would need a sort of a cascade execution of smart contracts and some distribution of payments. But I think it's possible to do. It's not a problem. I just don't understand the mechanics. But anyway, so we spoke about this project, and actually, so he's working on something really new that people don't know. So, I mean, when I say people, it's the general population, and it's something that doesn't even exist in code. But yeah, so I can break it right here with you guys. So he works on something that is called Valueize. Valueize. So there is the word eyes with value. So you can kind of see him coming.
Wow. Yeah,
when he says,
Stefan raised his digital hand. Before you dive in, it's going to be interesting to see what Stefan has to say.
Oh, sorry about that. Yes, go ahead.
I just got a little question. I was just curious. Are NFT, are these fungible tokens? Is it based on an upper ontology or something like that? Is that how it's based? Do you have like an upper ontology of some sort?
They're non-fungible tokens.
Yeah.
So they're digitally they're digital scarcities. Okay.
Right.
They're unique entities on the internet.
Right, got you. I was just thinking about the meaning of these, of like when they convey information or that. Does it use some sort of, is there some sort of ontology that it works with, or some way of saying this has an ontology about it? Is that how it works? Like you have some sort of codified, I don't know about the non-fungible bit, but maybe it's that, or, because I'm just thinking about what it sort of adds in some sort of clarity from what I can sense about ontology of what something means, and then can operate with it. Is that correct? Am I on the right track with that?
I don't know if I understand your question. I think Tim can also answer that.
I could take a shot at it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really quite rudimentary, Stephen.
Yeah.
They have token standards. So different NFTs, non-fungible token, and it's the T part where the questions you're asking are answered in a very prosaic, kind of a basic way. And it's really just kind of a manifest, really, of a bill of lading of what is the content. But it is being grown out rapidly with a whole proliferation of different standards from Ethereum improvement proposals and other different blockchain networks creating their own standard specifications, kind of the way you would specify a wall plug, at that level, but also really extending also out into the functionality and the things in a interactive maybe way, or a cross network interaction way, or other kind of extensions, building more and more sophisticated and also importantly in this environment composable token standards. So
Yeah.
it's not at, when you say upper ontology, it's really more of a kind of a bottom-up technical layer specification type thing at this level, I think.
Yeah, and you can generate an NFT as a key to open your house, for instance, or to unlock something. Doesn't necessarily has to be with art or with economy. So it has all sorts of utility, Stefan.
So there's a sort of a clarity that comes with it, isn't there? So there's, like you say, what you're talking about here, there is some sort of way in which a standard creates this power of I don't know if you call it not interoperability, but just clarity, that when you execute with this approach,
yeah, absolutely. And safety is a large part of it, right? It's absolutely right. So a large part of it is that trustability and like safety and liveness or whatever, all the different things that people would come to expect sort of functionally from what they envision or what they hope to achieve with whatever their NFT idea is or concept is, right? The people want it to be like you said, interoperable, reliably and safely and securely, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
All the itties that you want in the requirements list, so to speak.
Got you.
The way I understand it, so let me see if I can connect with semantics. The way I understand it is that the web was made, the way it functions is like copying files and bouncing them around the network from one node to another, right? So copying is essential to the way the web functions. And when you copy a file, you're essentially creating a clone, so you're not able to distinguish which is which, right? And the NFT, I think it's like a fingerprint, right, of something, of a file. It's like a fingerprint. It's not the file itself, it's the fingerprint. Okay, so let's say you have 1 TB and you fingerprint TB and you store that fingerprint in a database that is kind of trustable and immutable. Okay, so you're not storing TB, you're storing its fingerprint. So when you say, okay, when you say that these NFTs, they live on the blockchain, it's like, okay, the fingerprints of all these things, files, pictures, whatever there are, they're stored somewhere in an immutable way. So we can trust that they're not going to be tampered with. But the thing itself, the picture, can have 1 million copies. Okay, but let's say now you find one on the internet because you go on the Sensorica website and you see that picture, and you download it. But you want to know if it's a good picture, right? So maybe some weird person has changed 1 pixel in that picture, and you don't want that. Okay, you want the exact same picture. Okay, so so the fingerprint tells you if that picture has been modified or not. So that's how I understand it. Okay, it means that and that's how I think we could use it, because you could say we have an open source design. Okay, I give you a recipe of a cake. Okay, I have a recipe for a cake, and I say, Stefan, this is the recipe that famous cook created. Okay, 50 years ago, and I got it from the internet, and you say, yeah, but Tibi, how can you make sure that it's exactly the same recipe? How do you know that somebody has not changed like 3 eggs to 4 eggs? Okay, if you look at it, you may not notice the difference, but maybe somebody has changed a slight little thing that makes a difference in your cake, So the NFT is one of these technologies that allows you to know that this thing that I have, which is a copy, it's a clone. of that thing. That's how I understand it. I don't know if Tim, if you agree with this understanding.
I would just expand a little bit, Chidi, because the world around NFTs has evolved a lot in the past 2 years. So you have dynamical NFTs, for instance, where you can change the metadata. So it can you see we're experimenting with dynamical NFTs right now here via ReRe with one of the ReRe's projects that is Agroforest DAO. So we are mapping out the hosts of different types of crops, and these different types of crops, these different types of seeds, right? So you and they generate different types of cultures, and we can map that using IoT, for instance, pulling sensors to capture all sorts of data, and we can add a layer of relationship between the folks that buys those NFTs and cares and nurture those NFTs in a sense that they want to nurture that type of seeds and crops, right? So all the metadata goes alongside with it. So it's dynamical. It's called dynamical NFT. So this is one sort of application. But when I said that you can make an NFT a type of a key that unlocks the door of your house, I wasn't kidding. Actually, there's loads of applications using NFTs exactly for that. So it's a very rich environment. And now we're experimenting with a technology called hypercerts. Hypercerts. It's a certification of the things that you're doing to nurture something that generates reputation in the ReFi space, right? For instance, for you when you're going to make a contribution in some Gitcoin rounds, your contribution impacts X5, X10, X20, X30, for instance, right? So we are experimenting with hypercerts now. And there's so much things, man, that we can talk. But it's a whole new thing that you can do in Web3 space that in Web2 is impossible to do, right? But it still is a non-fungible token. It's not fungible. You just add metadata to it during time. So that's one more thing that I want to add here in the conversation.
Nice. Oh, that's helpful actually. I mean, in some ways, the reason I was also thinking about it is like, say you've got generally what people do in terms of how they try and talk about stuff and all that. And it's like the idea of what things are and how they can relate to each other is a bit on steroids with this. It goes beyond what is within our computation, yet it's still tractable to unpack what's going on. It's not like a black box. So and I was thinking in the same way. I was trying to think about some of the more embodiment type stuff that I'm doing. It's almost going in the other direction and saying, this is what people do. There's some stuff which you can't put in an ontology. It can't be codified. And that would be a kind of an exploration in where things are, which has to be done in a hyperlocal context with people relating to specific micro experiences, and both of those then are extensions beyond what we can do through daily conversations, like what goes beyond what we can do in this conversation here, for instance, or any other conversation. You can do things like you're talking about here with this blockchain that's beyond what we can do here, and the stuff that you could do in this kind of spatial awareness kind of sense finding work, which could also go beyond, but in a different way. But then I think it'd be really cool if both those technologies were able to be reached out to from different kinds of meso scales, if that makes sense, different kinds of places of practice. That'd be really fucking awesome.
I don't see how, I still don't see how the NFT could be applied to that. Because
it can't be. Like I'm saying, it's completely the opposite. So what I'm saying is it's a completely separate. That's the thing. It can't be. The two are the furthest from each other and the least compatible with each other. But you're reaching out from a mid zone. You're reaching out into this more abstracted blockchain, which is beyond what is in our natural language conversation, and then to find out what things might be and how they might relate, and then using that again to help normal conversations. And the same thing happens in terms of trying to understand what's going on in people's actual experience of making sense of real moments in real context, which could never be tracked by NFT, and NFT wouldn't try to. It's
No,
not
because I
about
think
that.
the NFT is like a, if you want to put it as a thing, is a representation that is pretty formal and fixed,
Exactly.
right? But
Exactly.
what you're talking about, I think we have I think I have the guy that could exchange with you on this. Jordan, the guy that comes to the lab and to work on his sculpture.
Mm-hmm.
He's working with some students at McGill. He's developing the semiotics of of emotions,
Mm-hmm.
and he's pretty advanced. He's been working on this project for years. So they're using these stripes that you put around your head, the EEG, right? They measure brain waves.
Yeah, yeah.
So this is part of like, human computer interfaces, like you're thinking about moving the mouse and the computer does it. Okay, so yeah, so you detect patterns in brain waves at different locations on the skull, and interpret that, give meaning to it. But what they're doing, okay, when I say the semiotics of emotions, is that they're developing the sort of the language. How do you put emotions on the internet? Okay, how do you communicate emotions through the internet? And so now the way we do it is we're using emoticons or short keys like LOL, stuff like that, right? So here's a token that says something about my emotion, but it's indirect. It's indirect, and you can lie. You can easily lie, right? You can lie because it's a script. Um, so what you're talking about, like in context hyperlocal, it's more like body language type of thing, right? So I see you, so you can't lie unless you're a good actor. Okay, I can see all the twitches in your facial muscles, and I know you're lying, or I know you're joking, or I know, Um, so that kind of context, could be realized with this technology, which is that we're chatting now on Zoom, and we wear these sensors. So we're transmitting voice, but we're also transmitting. So we're transmitting voice, okay, which is language, but we're also transmitting like raw emotional data, and and that's I cannot control that, and sometimes that emotion is transmitted before I even realize, let's say I'm mad, and I express it through language. So it's like very, very low level, pre-language, pre-consciousness kind of information, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Now the danger is that if these corporations that want to sell you stuff get their hands on this, they can make you make decisions before you even know it, right? because they say that with these kind of technologies of measuring your brain waves, they know that you have made a decision before you know it. Okay, so yeah. But what happens now is that you're putting like emotions, like raw stuff, like straight on the internet, and have a sort of a language, right? The semiotics have a sort of a
Yeah.
language
Oh, that's
to
interesting.
transmit that, and
Yeah.
then you can create a context. Now you can create the thing that you're talking about, right? That it cannot be like there is no
It's
ontology
a
for it. Okay, it just happens.
it's a bullshit. It's a bullshit detector. It's a bullshit detector.
Yeah. At that
Yeah,
scale.
where's Lauren? Where's Lauren?
I mean,
Laurie would love this.
yeah, she would. I mean, I think Tim might have wanted to say something there, but I think that you're still in the area of whatness, when you're talking about that sort of thing, because semantics is what something is. So that's great, and it may be that that is something that happens at whatever mid-scale we're talking about, whichever practice scale it is. So if it's someone communicating about accountancy, it's like what happens in the accountancy environment, of which there may be abstracted tokens to help, and whatever the field of practice, then this would be tracking some things that are going on. What I'm talking about is using awareness, i.e. it's using a flatter ontology of finding out where things need to be for things to make sense. David Grove, who developed clean language, he says that he used to have a great way of talking about this in clean space. Is clean, you find the space which needs to be there for the other spaces to make sense. And where they need to be for that to be the right place. So it's a kind of and that's even a bit more networked than what I'm talking about. So it could be interesting to connect that in this with that kind of mid-scale, because it's got to be synthesized somewhere, just like in a way the fungible tokens are, unless they're just doing some executable task. You have to, the idea is that, so what does this all mean, as well as what is it saying, what's it codified for? So what's the meaningfulness for this in the context of interest? And that's the same thing, but from a very different direction, going into a very different kind of way of knowing that I'm kind of interested in. But the question can be, there's like, what we don't have to be all, like you just said, this guy is doing the stuff with brainwaves. It doesn't have to be, that may be or may not be. I don't know if you're thinking that would integrate with NFTs, or it could just be another vector, right? And and you could have more. You can have multiple vectors reaching out from a particular scale of interest or a system of interest, and they could be slightly different or very different, or completely opposite in the way they operate. But the question is, what pragmatically does that allow it? What's the difference that makes the difference now?
Yeah, this is a more almost philosophical and more profound conversation that we started today's touchdown, but it's a very interesting one, Stefan. And I would say that the difficulty and the challenge to make this type of conversation relating to different scales, as you put it, as in the perspective of Infusion Labs, right, is that most of the things that related with fungible tokens or non-fungible tokens are utilities, right? So they are essentially an utility, and what you're talking about is some that in physics called Sider space, that is a non-spatial thing, that where you have all the possibilities are there, all the possibilities of creation are there. So how can we have this conversation related to NFTs or even to fungible tokens, not talking about utilities, talking about spaces, interspaces or inner spaces of things that just simply they just come out of existence because they want to manifest. They're just a manifestation of life or existence, right? But they don't necessarily come with the, with the driver to become a utility or to be useful, So we as a species, we generate this, this dimension or this layer or this, interface, that everything that we do must be useful, has some utility. So how can we talk about what you're talking about without without thinking, without conceptual, without having this curse to be useful, right? And I think that's a very interesting conversation, because that really really is challenging the way that we relate to ourselves. It's challenging the way that we perceive life around us, or perceive the manifestation of life around us. And I just want to add this to what you're just talking about.
That's really useful, actually.
Useful. That's a paradox.
That is. No, it is. Well, I'm in the learning stage, but I also see it's kind of there's. It's good to think about things that are sort of some sort of like thinking about things when you say about utilities. Thinking about things in pragmatism might be really helpful here. You know, it's kind of just thinking about things in terms of what. You know, because obviously there's then the realities of what that's like in a digital form. But I mean, the idea of a utility is something that's stable. You can also call it commodity, couldn't you? In some way.
That's the thing. That's exactly the thing. What's the difference between a utility and a commodity? We're in a scaling perspective, right? And in this non-spatial thing, like where you don't pre-index it as something useful, or you don't pre-index it as something that has utility, or something that can be commoditized, right? What's the difference between utility and commodity in this within this perspective, from this perspective? It's almost it's almost impossible to think. It's like it's almost impossible to think. It's we are so ingrained with this concept and practice, cultural practice of everything has to have some usefulness, or to become a utility or a commodity, that it's very difficult for us. For instance, nature itself, with all its complexities, is it you that does nature as an entity, let's put it this way, this complex entity thinks about what is useful or what is not useful, what is a commodity or not? I don't think so. But we as one of the million species of nature, we do that. Why? Why do we do that? Right? That's a very interesting exploration. I don't know if it's so exciting for TB or Tim, but that's a very interesting conversation.
I'm putting a link. The one thing that I'm thinking of, I shared Wardley Maps with you, and what I'm putting in is the thing that Wardley Maps does is it puts one end utility stroke commodity as the thing that things can be moved towards, and you decide then to open source them, versus when something's like a new project or an idea, right? Because like if I come up with 10 ideas of which one might be good, I'm not going to put the 10 ideas, you know, it wouldn't make sense to put 10 ideas into some sort of standardized protocol, because they're by their very nature, they're trying to find their feet, you know? So, but over time you start, so, you know, the Wardley map thing could be kind of related. What I'm sort of interested in is what if you could go in, I see two types of churns in terms of, I'll show you something here from, this is a diagram from like 10 years ago. Let me just, you see this picture here? You see that picture there? You've got like above and below So
Yeah,
like
Stefan.
you've got whatever someone is, and above that you've got how we try and manage it, and below that is kind of what's happening in a maybe a more interactive, you could say social way. And I see the NFTs being part of what's trying to go up to be above the above. Some of the stuff I've been trying to do is what goes below the below. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So there's something about how do you go from learning and coaching people in a context, because I presume that the idea is you are just like capitalism tries to do in a way. It's like you work somewhere, and the idea is capitalism takes care of the system of value exchange at a macro scale beyond what humans can do, and it gives us something back which we then bring in. The trouble is, it's corrupted and it's problematic, and this is another way of doing that, right? This is that kind of idea of the meso scale, and this is what we can understand. The thing with we go down is we can sense it, but we can't necessarily articulate it, or if we can, it's way too granular. So as you go down, it becomes more granular and more, I suppose, more like you have to be there. Does that make sense? And the higher you go up, people try and get towards singularity and maybe more of an observer position. So, you know, this is more embedded and situated. This is more observer based. And this basic idea, which I ended up, this is before I knew about active inference and then started adapting it to that, is kind of this is the kind of the basis of infusion in a way. So the mid-level is the infusion. There's not an arrow going from here up. There's an arrow going out from the meso. Now the question then becomes is where is the meso? Right? And what happens in those different mesos? And that varies, right?
Yeah,
So
but yeah. But let me make a quick in and out in your explanation. I think that will vary depending if we're talking about one person or a collective of people. Like, so that the mesoscale will vary a lot, and for me, this collective of folks, of people, or of nodes, of peers, whatever, is not the summatory of each one. It's the way that these folks, these peers, these nodes regulates relationally, right? Interactively. As if they are more interactive, right? In a sense that there's no concentration, there's no centralization. They're not forming a hub, for instance, or because when you have a constellation, when you have different phenomena around networks, you have this different type of patterns: centralized, decentralized, and distributed, right? Yeah. And they are emergent phenomena in the sense that they are not always only centralized or decentralized or distributed. They have a life that when these peers are interacting between them, they become more centralized or centralized or distributed, right? Yeah. But they can form, they can for depending on the purpose. If the purpose is very clear for everybody, for every peer, for every node, right? It can become a hub, for instance, yeah. Or can generate an epicenter that disperse the energy to other surroundings. So the mesoscale would vary a lot depending on the level and the quality, of the peer-to-peer interaction between the nodes of the peers, right? For me, yep. In my understanding. And when it comes to a peer itself, to a person itself, is something more subjective. right? It's really subjective. You can't. It's almost impossible to be objective to understand what is Stefan's mesozone or what is my mesozone. That I'm the only one that can, let's say,
your identity.
Try to explore. Yes, you understand what is where's my mesoscale, right? Where's my mesoscale, and how the agency and how this mesoscale generates or creates agency for me as a person, right? And I say person, I don't say individual, because I say individual is a concept that is not, you don't divide, right? Individual is something that doesn't divide, it's a thing in itself, right? And our species, for instance, and most of the species, they don't define themselves only by their morphological characteristics, right? They, like bacteria, for instance, or in the cellular dimension, we were talking last week about Michael Levine, they are always interacting between them. They are always changing even morphological characteristics, right? So this is a very interesting, and I would add, just to finish my my quick in and out, I just add that it's not just a question of above and below. You see, this is a multidimensional dynamic, so it's very spatial, and in that sense, you would have. Because you can have above and below in one dimension, right? You can have above and below in two dimensions. So, but that differs a lot. And the last thing I want to say is that remember when I provoke you, Stefan, saying how to think utility or commodity without thinking its usefulness?
Yeah.
There's actually an Italian philosopher that is not among us anymore, called Domenico Di Masi, that created in the end of in the 90s a concept called creative idleness. He said the space of the non-spatial way of being is to dive yourself in creative idleness, where you don't pre-index, you don't give utility to nothing. You're just diving in some idleness, in this idleness that doesn't pre-index nothing, is this non-spatial that is completely divorced of the usefulness framework that we use for everything in our daily lives in society. So that's me here.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
I want to jump in here because I finally found some relevance. Sometimes I zoom out when Stefan dives deep into these very abstract worlds. But as you may know, I'm revisiting this paper that I wrote many years ago about social structures and the scale of social structures, and you can see there the a description of how people in a village organize, what is the kind of social structure that emerges, and the economic system that emerges in that kind of context, because I think these are just emergent high level phenomena, right? And then we can think about family, clans, kingdoms, nations, so on and so forth. And you may think about the global society. So it's interesting here when you have like people in a village, which is like physical proximity, access to the other directly through our senses, I would say, that have been tuned somehow to manage some interaction among social beings. So facial recognition, our brain is tuned for that. The morphology of the face with all these little muscles that are able to convey a very complex information about our inner states, emotional states.
Mhm.
So we're kind of designed, fashioned to live a gregarian life, right? And since humans have evolved, in the physical world, it goes as far as our senses go, right? Ears, eyes, smell, and all that. And then we want to form like more I don't like more spatially, let's say, distributed or societies or societies with more people than we can handle to interact face to face. So how do we cope with that? So if you look at the body biology, right? Yes, there's this proximity, like these mechanical cues for cells, the pressure around them that tells them how to grow and what to specialize in and what to do. And there's also the chemical communication in proximity. Okay. The cells kind of they talk to each other if they're very very close spatially. But then you have the organization of like complex bodies. So then you have the formation of these other systems that are not in the meso, like you say. They're not very analog, but they kind of start to be formalized, right? So you have the nervous system where information has to be encoded, right?
Mhm.
So there's a formalism. There's a sort of a new semiotic system that emerges there, and then you have the hormones, okay, that are essentially they're essentially like universal tokens, right? When they're sent into the body, they stimulate some type of action, and you have the interaction between these two systems. But what I'm trying to say here is that the biology has invented this long range, okay, information systems, to cope with the fact that cells can exist in a coherent body, far removed from one another, so exceeding their ability to sense their immediate environment. And that's with humans too. So we invented language. We invented money, right? It's a long range tool for economic exchange. Doesn't require me to know you, right? Markets, that it doesn't require me to know you. We can be strangers living in different countries, meet once, at the marketplace,
Yeah.
and trade. So there's all these systems, right, that are long range, right? So short range, long range. That's what I'm trying to.
Yeah, that's I think that captures it in another. Yeah, definitely. Like as you go up, I mean, one of the key things that as you go up, even on the body, is you've got your eyes at the top, right? And as you try and get more perspective, you go up, right? So, and theoretically, the more you go up with your perspective, the less you need to be directly in relation to the thing you're looking at. I mean, if I were to be honest, if you went into space, the Earth from like the moon probably looks almost the same as it did a million years ago, right? From that perspective.
But
And then
but,
the
but
other
Stefan,
one is when you get closer and you've got people
Stefan,
participating, it becomes almost the opposite. You have to be relating to be able to interact.
yeah, but Stefan, you have to better define what is up and what is down. When remember that I said that this is not one dimension. This is multidimensional,
Oh yeah. Well,
and we
yeah.
are and we are cybernetic beings in the sense that we create all sorts of exoskeletons that aggregates complexity, aggregates information, aggregates understanding, adds sensory apparatus, cybernetic sensor apparatus, technological sensor apparatus to our perceptions,
Yeah.
right? So it's a spatial, it's a spatial movement. It's not something that only
Yeah.
depends on the grade of going up or going down. You understand
I
me?
think there is something that has meaning here. Is like what is closest, what is far.
Yeah, that's
That
a
could
good
have
one
more
too.
meaning.
This is very
That's
simple. I
a,
mean, this is 10 years. This is actually this is like what led to some of the other diagrams, right? But this was this is before I'd done a lot of the other stuff. this was like an earlier sort of way of sort of trying to understand it. But you're right, yeah, absolutely. And I think, but you could also say, depends, like say you take it from the point of view of identity, right? So if I'm asking someone what it's like for them, then they're doing that. Now, then I'm asking someone, the same person, what's it like to be in that team? Now they're going to speak as the Markov blanket's the team, right? Or what they expect as a team. Now the Markov blanket's the organization. Now the Markov blanket, if you're treating Markov blankets as being what sensory action, perception, information am I going to be able to interact with, right? So if I'm going to represent the organization, I can start to interact in the niche as the organization, which is very different to being the person, right? And obviously people step in and out of roles, but that's the kind of, so that meso scale, you can change, if you take it from an agent-based perspective or an action method perspective, like psychodrama or something, from the inside, it is what it is for the person based on how they're taking their attention at the time, right? Just like now. So that, I think that's true. And in this case, this particular sketch was more about, if you have an organization, they're trying to connect to community here, which is very, in relation, so if someone's in an organization here, this is the local community that has a relationship, but the relationship is not about being in that organization. The relationship is being engaged by the organization through some other adjacency, right? And then the idea is then to bring this back up, it's participatory narrative inquiry. You've got a participatory narrative approach to integrate back up, which is then can be a decision support process. Whereas in many cases, I think often from above, you want to have a decision-making process, or you're trying to simplify decision-making, like Lumio, all these different voting approaches. They're all more about this idea of having something where you don't need to be in relation to, and that, again, this mechanism can help solve the problem of how to take on board all these perspectives of what people's opinions are. Down here, I'm more interested in, like, and this is again, Cynthia Kurtz says, a tablespoon of stories worth a bucket full of opinion down here. Now, you don't want stories up there, you want opinions. Down here, you don't want opinions. You want stories that are grounded with those that are in relation to it. Because at the end of the day, you're trying to find something useful that can come in here. And out of all the thousands of things that could come up, what's the three things that could really make the difference?
Yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying, Stefan. But I wouldn't say, but even the opinions up there, they are captured by macro narratives, in a sense that the opinions, they are the reflection of what became systematized in society. It became a macro narrative in economics, macro narrative in religion, a macro narrative. So most of the opinions that you can get out in this upper stage that you put it in the upper scale, they are indexed. They come out of things that people culturally embedded in themselves, that are already massively systematized in society.
Yeah.
So it's just a reinforcement mechanism. And so the upper stage is just a reinforcement mechanism of the actual status quo. It's not something that's going to disrupt it. You see?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just going to reinforce. Yeah.
I mean, in a way, I think you make a good. I mean, for me, in this diagram here, the idea was this churn that's happening. The sort of churn that's happening over here was where, in a way, this is where the focus of this was, and the challenge with this is that this doesn't really give me a way to do anything about what's up here. Like you say, that sort of happened, but it's creating change in this churn, and I think you're creating change in this churn. Right, and they're both needed. Does that make sense? So this diagram wasn't thinking about that.
Yeah, in the more ingrained, when you go below in the below scale, where you say that it's more ingrained, there's you're actually talking. I know that at the time that you did this, you didn't even have the concept of what is peer-to-peer paradigm, but
Yeah.
you actually have a peer-to-peer interactive dynamics in the below scale, right? And the below scale, you have that, and generates disruptive. It can generate disruptive micro narratives. You see, but there's a paradox here. and that's where I see where we as a civilization, societies, we are in now. You see, we don't want to reinforce the ethos and the status quo of the type of society that we became massively with all these massive systems that are running it, right?
Yeah.
Macro geopolitical state-centric things like wars and the macroeconomics, this hyper-consumerism, this exploitative extraction organism, you know, that is deploying Earth, not deploying, is extracting all the resources from our planet. So that's why, Stefan, a while ago, and it's interesting to say this because we are having lots of conversations here in RWI Touchdown since in its inception about it. Is that the type of changes, that disruptive changes that it can make in the actual status quo or ethos of the societies that we became massively systematizing. The mechanism that you highlighted there is broken, and it's good that it's broken. You see, the low scale, the peer-to-peer low scale, where you generate micro narratives, where you generate folklore, you generate culture, is in trouble. Is algorithmically in trouble in the sense that this massive Web2 social media platforms, they were able to encapsulate a lot of people with their attention algorithms, right? And they are polarizing the peer-to-peer experience. They're polarizing in the sense that they are at war, a cold war, and even hot war between each other because they became polarized because of this huge attention macroeconomic mechanism that this Web2 platform creates, right? But even so, the capture is not 100%. It's not universal, right? So you have the fringes. So you have those that are conscious, that are aware of this mechanism, right? This mechanism of capture, of capturing your attention, right? So what I'm saying is that what you just highlighted is true, but the opportunity, the discovery opportunity space that is creating with the brokenness of the type of civilization that we became, right? We are broken. We're in a very complex collapse. Is at the same time, there's a part of the peer-to-peer relations in the below scale that you put it that are polarized, and they are reinforcing the massive systems that exist, and they are even forcing these massive systems like state-centric systems like governments or even huge corporations, and reinforcing them to, hey guys, won't you defend our way of living? Won't you guys? How will you guys? Make a stance, right? How you guys make a stance in a sense that what you guys can do, right? Like nation states and governments, great corporations, what you guys can do to iterate again the society that we were before the crisis or before the collapse, right?
Absolutely.
So that is happening. And at the same time, there's happening what we're doing here. We're creating new disruptive peer-to-peer narratives in a very fractal way, but it doesn't have the punch of the below scale that it is very integrated in informing the above scale. I just want to say that.
No, I think what you said is, well, but both these things can help each other. I think this if both of these things can be found to, because a lot of the problems at the micro scale is it's not about distributing it evenly. It's about finding where you need to do what when, or where to do something when is useful. And it's a whole different paradigm of working in participatory development. The problem is it can only ever get to a certain level. And let me, I'm going to have to take this call, actually. It's my landlord. He's, I'm going to just dash for 1 sec, but carry on with this conversation. I'm going to put some notes in Discord.
Yes. So guys, forgive me to be, you are going to say something new, a new project that that Arthur Brock is doing in the shadows. And I saw Stefan with his digital hand up, and we got a whole new thing here coming, happening here with us today. Yes. But if you want to comment a little bit of what we're talking, or if you want to just share a little bit about the shadow project of Arthur Brock, feel free.
It's not a shadow project. It's just something that he hasn't announced yet, because it's something that he wants to start coding, right? But it kind of relates to what we were talking now. Valueize. So it has the word eyes there and value. So like I was saying before, you can see him coming, because he used to talk about currencies, see the current, right? So I see. So essentially, all this is about surfacing. It's about making people aware of. Okay. In terms of currencies, is like surfacing the currents, surfacing what moves, where, how, right? And it's not just about money. It's a lot of things that can flow within social structures, social settings, and things that could be tangible or intangible, could be material or immaterial, right? So the currencies is, for him, is this thing that where you put some boundary conditions, you create some signaling also, to get something in motion. Okay, it's what gives motion to stuff, what makes stuff flow, right? According to him, without currencies, there is no society, or is it just a standstill? It's just it's nothing. There is no motion. There is no life, right? Now, Valueize is it's not a current, but it's actually about the things that move. Okay. From what I understood, because this is so new even in his head, okay, that the conversation was more exploratory than something like this is precisely what I want to do. And yeah, so he even he was even asking some questions, and in some cases I told him, well, this is precisely what we're practicing here at within the Sensorica environment. Okay. So it's about what moves. It's a system that is not so formalized like an NRP. The NRP of Sensorica was designed in the context where we had to manage some grants, and was the interface of an open network through some shell corporations that we created as an interface with the government and with some universities. So we were operating in that context, where some people were working on a project using money from the government in collaboration with academia. So we had to interface. We had to interface with the world that understood some type of language, right? The language of management and money. so when we created NRP, you could actually see that interface was important for us. So we created that interface, meaning that when we say this is a bunch of people, agents that use resources and log the events of that, what happened, the use of that resource in that particular context or project by that particular agent, so we created this upper layer, right? We created this upper layer of of management and transaction, which is to speak the current language. Like, okay, so you worked on a project, we use a proxy as a time, and we use roles to modulate and evaluate or estimate. Okay, so you did $500 worth of work, and we have a budget which is in dollars, and here's a bit of money from that budget, right? In that context. So that's the more like formalized Valueize. That it's not the Valueize, but it's more the formalized accounting, talking about agents, resources, and events. Arthur is also talking about resources, agents, and events, but in a not very formalized way. Okay, so for example, I came to the Sensorica lab and I read a story to everybody and made everybody laugh. Okay, could be something. It's an event. It happens, right? It's an event. It happens. It's could be valuable. You may be annoying, and people say, "Get the hell out of here with your story. We want to work." Or it can be very valuable. Everybody stops and say, "Wow, that was a very inspiring story." So there's a thing. There is an event. Okay, that has an impact. Okay, and it's not monetary. It's not transferable. It's you can use like metrics like time. It has some sort of an intangible effect on the community. But Valueize is to capture these kind of events. Okay, could be something more clear, more tangible. Like I map the floor. That is something that it could easily say, well, that activity from the labor market is worth $15 per hour, and it took you 20 minutes. You can have that. You can have that urge, like to jump in and plug a metric into it and translate it into something that is recognizable in the economy. But Arthur says not so fast. Okay, not so fast, because not everybody has to be translated through that metrics. It's just a gesture at the lab, and it could be just logged as an event, just exist as an event, which is valuable for the community, but it doesn't have to be quantified or formalized in some way and compared with something else. So it's creating that kind of more organic layer where, according to now I'm trying to speak like him. Where people get together and form contexts, and then they do stuff together, and some of this stuff is good for the whole. It's not it's not the stuff that goes from one individual to another, but it's the transaction that goes from the person to the group and from the group to the person. And that's the question is, what is that? How does it manifest itself? Can we create a sort of a label for these things and just put them somewhere? Okay, in a sort of a digital space.
But Chibi,
and be able to see, just a second, be able to see, because that's why it's Valueize. Be able to see, let everybody see. Be able to see, let everybody see that there is something that goes between one individual and the group and the individual. Okay. And for him, that's, if we do it properly, what the effect is that somebody mapped the floor at the Sensorica lab, which everybody comes and feels comfortable and it's nice, everything is clean, but nobody knows who did it. Okay, and so there was a transaction from an individual to a group that is worth surfacing it but he acknowledges that sometimes it's not worth surfacing it, it's not worth capturing, but some of them it is worth capturing if the group decides that that's the case, and that changes the dynamic of the groups towards nurturing the group by surfacing these things. Okay, so I think I'm done with that. I think it's pretty clear. I don't know.
Yeah, totally clear. And I'm fascinated that he is thinking about this. I understand Valueize, visualize. I understand the relationship, visualize and that. Yeah. But that's exactly what we're doing in ReRe for almost 2 years now. So that's exactly what we're doing with the common pool of shared resources, coming from the logic abundance, where people share what is abundant as a resources for them.
Yeah.
But now we evolved. Now we evolved saying that there's that abundant resource that is abundant for you, right? Like the way that you smile, the way that you hug, the way that you share stories, the way that is abundant for you, because we are complex beings. That's abundant. There's the empathic resources that's the resource that's not abundant, but is available to people to actually access it, right? And there's the conditionated resources, that is some resources that is you can share it, but it has some conditions in order to access it. Those conditions can be related to you, can be related to the cluster, to the common pool in our case, or something else, something totally outside of the common pool or yourself, right? And we're actually doing things that way, TB. We made the second edition of Feijoada Safa that was able to attend almost 100 people in a very decentralized, culturally decentralized and unconference way, generating indignation, this common pool, all sorts of, we map it out, all sorts of resources, everything, even those people that just chime in the common pool just to just to hear, to do some empathic listening from people, like in the day, like if people comes to the feijoada and they want to talk about their problems, I'm gonna be there, right? So what I'm saying, what I'm really impressed is that what is Arthur thinking, we are already implementing. So, but of course, one thing can, have a conversation with another with time. It's going to be
Yes, because essentially what I told him is that the practice is there, okay, and he wants to create the software that could somehow take care of that in a more, I don't know, systematic way, interoperable way, okay, on top of Holochain. And I think it's worth informing him of these practices, so that the tool becomes more versatile and useful. Because that's the case sometimes, where developers just go on a tangent and create something that it's not good enough. Yeah. So yeah, feel free to contact him and say, hey, I heard you work on this thing. I want to share with you our practice and make you look at some stuff. And that's what I'm going to do too with the NRP. I actually told him, so that's exactly the practice that we have. You can log anything. You can log that you mapped the floor, or you told a story, because it's an event. Essentially, you log anything that happens that you think is contributing something to the community. And it may be that your log is just a log. I mean, nobody cares about it. Nobody has used your thing. Nobody has signaled thumbs up, that was good, we liked it. Nobody has signaled anything about that. So it's just a log. It's fine. You know what I'm saying? It's there. And I told him the logging is not compulsory. It's not it's not an obligation. You could decide that it's irrelevant, or that you simply don't do it. Yeah, so I told him that because he was seeing the accounting part, he was seeing the accounting, so the formal part of the NRP, and I said, yeah, that's there because of the context, but there's a deeper layer that is exactly what you're talking about. So I will inform him about this, and maybe we can be beta testers.
Invite him, see if he can come next Friday with us here. We would be lovely to have a chat with him. But in the case of ReRe, we generate this, common pool based on abundance logic, right? And we generate a mutual access peer-to-peer dynamics that it just flows. It just flows organically, interactively, because people don't stop to negotiate it, don't see it as a transaction per se, right? It's not even a trade. You're not trading something for. It's just there where people
it's not a marketplace of favors.
Yes, yes. That's the difference. You see, the disruption, in a sense that we're not generating a marketplace. We're generating an abundance place, different types of abundance place, with all sorts of resources coming.
But I want to point to something there because you're creating this ephemeral, I don't know, pool, okay, of access. And I want you to be careful about the time factor here, because ephemeral things can work within some structures, but if you extend the time, they may not. Okay, so let's say the question is that transposable to Sensorica, where you can have like long-term projects that could last like 3 years.
Yeah.
That same practice be directly applied without, because what I can understand here is that as time goes by, agents adapt and can gain some of these processes. You know what I'm saying?
What we learned, TB, until now, is that the events themselves are temporal common pools. Now they burst, they just ignite. They are co-created and they happen and they disperse. They become another thing. Those resources that are there goes to another event, and at the same time we are creating a constant common pool of shared resources for each project in ReRe, right? They're not there yet. We expect to do this in this 2 months range now, 2 to 3 months. We're going to generate a mirrored common pool of shared resources for each project, but mirrored in 3 dimensions: people to people, people to projects, and projects to projects, creating different types of abundances between them all the time, because it's an interactive flow of things happening all the time, right? And this isn't there already there. We are not there yet. We're not there yet. But this experience with events, right? The second edition of Vejada Safa, all those events that we already done, almost 8 events that we already done, 8 events already done using this type of peer-to-peer abundance logic-driven dynamics to generate common pools, right? And working with all sorts of resources, not capital, resources, right? And now we are trying to see if how can we have a relationship between ReRe's common pool of shared resources, right, with the 8 forms of capital of the ReFi ecosystem in Web3, right? Because in ReFi, they are working with these different types of permacultural capitals, right? Experiential capital, social capital, spiritual capital, and things like that. And we're trying to see how can this very complex doing dynamics, interactive dynamics that generates the common pool for that event can have a relationship with the way that ReFi is registering, is recognizing, is valuing, right? The contributions to public goods, to projects that are generating ownership public good states. So now we're doing this type of exploration, right? But what I want to say that what is Arthur doing is very interesting that he's in this place, because that's exactly what Sensorica has been doing in a different way, and this is exactly what ReRe is doing in a more complex, driven, more organic, interactive way. So, yeah, fascinating to know about that. Fascinating. I wonder if Tim would like to say something. I don't know. He's just listening. Hey, Tim.
Hey, that's yeah, it's been interesting to listen. Yeah, big stuff. I was just I had my hand up earlier just on a minor thing about the tokenization and the NFT conversation way back when. Just to comment that rather than sort of counterpose them, I think in terms of like incompatibility or incommensurability has seemed to be kind of the setup around some of the things being raised earlier on in that sort of abstract conversation. One way to think of the NFTs in a way is kind of just like another form of digitalization, right? So Stephen, like I'm thinking back to when you were talking about NFTs as antithetical to what you were talking about. Maybe also just orthogonal, like the same way that like a musician can use digital technologies to create beautiful songs, or a artist or a storyteller can use digital technologies. And now we're seeing AI, and okay, so let's not open that can of worms just yet. I'm just saying on a basic level, the whole NFT things maybe that Vinicius was getting to about how the processes and capabilities are becoming more and more sophisticated. Maybe just one way to think of it is another pixelization of life and the world and interactions and things, right? It's just a different level, different scope, different scale, different kind, different mechanisms. So, but it represents still another layer or level of digitalization. So just the same way as early books by, I forget, but or just the general theme that came under the rubric of what is it? It from bit, or it to bit, and it and bit. Distinguishing the its and the bits. Okay, so there's early talk about those sorts of things, and in the same sort of spirit of Jobs stuff in terms of like typefaces, and the artistic motivations of his digital, creations, right? So, NFTs are just another one of those kinds of things too. So I don't limit their expressiveness or where they could go, but they obviously have, and what you were speaking to, right, inherent, limitations of attending to their kind, for sure.
Interesting.
Let's start to wrap up here. Let's make one more round of appreciations. Hey, Stefan, I don't know if you were able to listen. Oh, you were able. Oh, that's good. TD shared about the latest Arthur Brock's project, and I was amazed to know that it has almost a direct relationship with what we're doing through ReRe as a cultural Web3 regenerative protocol, right? So really interesting to know that. And yeah, it has a lot of tangible points with the previous conversation that we were having before you went to talk with your landlord. But if you want to make some wrapping observations here for our RWI touchdown of today, feel free, man.
Thanks. Yeah, really good. I think this is really important stuff. I suppose one of the things that I sort of can see this connecting with is this idea of scale deep, which may happen in many places. So how do you scale deep in many places? Scale out to connect and relate, and often that's a bit more industrious and intentional, and then scale up, which is maybe a bit more higher levels of power and abstraction, and this ability to keep these close and not have these happening in isolation seems more plausible with the kinds of skill sets, and then there may well, it seems more plausible. So I think there's a lot of good stuff here. So thank you.
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff. So guys, that's it for today.
Wait! I wanna just prompt.
Okay.
I want to just prompt Stefan for a future conversation, maybe next time. Stefan, I would like to explore with you the temporal dimension, because we always talk about, distance, up, down, some measure of like spatial distance, right? And orientation, but I think the temporal dimension is something worth exploring. And before you came back, we were just alluding to that, because when you analyze the situation today, there is memory systems like for example culture in society, or DNA for a cell. So you're connected to your past, you're connected to your ancestors. Your action today depend on the actions on the past. And also there is this temporal dynamic, like they say in the army. Once you siege a city, your army changes fundamentally, because now they're settled down. So they dig in. They're essentially creating their own city outside of that city, and their focus changes to survival and being able to be there for a long time. So they're kind of entrenching themselves. So the army becomes not a fighting offensive force, but like a sort of a stable society. So there's these dynamics, that are time related. So the more the process extends through time in the future, the more, its dynamics structure changes. So yeah, just to open up, and maybe we can have this discussion later, because we talk about physical proximity a lot, or physical distance, but what about the time dimension? If you have a project that extends in time, or that comes from the past, something like that. Anyway,
Yeah.
That's all I have to say.
That was great. I just want to add to what you just said, that we too talk about proximities to ReRe as a cultural Web3 regenerative protocol, in the sense that you can be more. We don't talk about levels of hierarchy, right? We talk about levels of proximity. How close you are to the heart of the kernel of the ReRe, right? So how culturally you appropriated the paradigms that co-substantiates ReRe as a. So we talk about that type of proximity too. So it's not only a physical proximity, it's a value proposal proximity. So I just want to add that. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Okay, guys. See you around as usual. Bye bye.
You.